Your son is trapped in the school's lower level. The words hit Mr. Grant like a physical blow. Just hours earlier, Ethan had disappeared from one of the city's most secure schools. Surveillance cameras showed nothing. Doors were locked tight. Teachers murmured in corners. Police swept every hallway. No one saw the small girl from the streets and the seemingly simple decision she made, the choice that would unravel a secret strong enough to rewrite the family's history. Before we go any further, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Late afternoon descended on West Bridge Preparatory. Students flooded the pathways, laughing and shoving, oblivious to the quiet girl with the trash cart. Leah pulled it slowly, shoulders hunched, head down. A juice box fell from a bin, spilling across her sleeve. Snickers followed her steps. "You smell like the alley," someone muttered. She wiped the sticky stain with the cuff of her oversized jacket and pressed on. Leah wasn't a student. She earned a few dollars collecting and sorting trash, sleeping near the train station afterward where the cold cement kept her company. The janitor let her in through the side door, handed her gloves far too large and said nothing. Days passed in this rhythm. Stairs, bins, the smell of rust and dust from the basement vents. But that day a boy altered her routine. Ethan Grant, quiet, polite, the son of a wealthy man with cars that lined the street like sentries. Weeks before he had offered her a half sandwich wrapped neatly saying, "It's fresh. Take it." He looked at her as if she were more than just a shadow passing the hall. Leah had eaten it on the stoop, alone. Now the courtyard emptied. Leah stacked bags when she saw Ethan walking briskly along the back path, holding a pale blue book against his chest. The edges were worn. He moved with purpose, careful not to be noticed. He slipped through the old basement door, the yellow caution tape flapping loosely. A weak light under the doorway flickered, then steadied. Leah paused. The basement always carried a chill, a scent of dust and paper mingled with faint bleach. 2 seniors passed, whispering that the alley girl had a crush. Leah ignored them, pulling her sleeves over her wrists. The cart squeaked as she turned toward the dumpsters. She told herself Ethan would be back soon. The sun fell lower. A bus coughed by the curb. Lockers slammed inside. Leah finished her route, looping past the basement once more. The light under the door blinked, then vanished. Footsteps echoed above as the last class of the day emptied. Her throat tightened, almost forcing her to knock. Almost. She told herself not to and walked on. By the gate, the yard was empty, litter rolling in the breeze. Leah counted her small earnings, slipping them into her worn shoes, and headed toward the station lights. She whispered a prayer that Ethan was safe, perhaps reading that pale blue book. She tried not to picture the door that had swallowed him. Morning brought frost and a brittle chill. The first bell rang. Ethan's absence was immediately noted. Staff marked him in red. By second period, rumors had started. He ran away, he was in the clinic. Leah slipped past classrooms with trash liners, ears straining. Fragments of conversation rose around her. She kept moving. By third period, black SUVs and cameras crowded the school loop. Mr. Grant arrived, coat flapping in the wind. The principal greeted him, but his questions were calm yet terrifying. Where had Ethan last been? No one knew. Lockers slammed, silence followed. The intercom requested teachers check every bathroom and storage room. A drone hovered above the courtyard. Leah wiped gum from her glove, eyes drawn again to the back path. That same chill from last night curled inside her chest. She stepped outside, pretending to inspect a bin. 2 freshmen whispered about Ethan having enemies, rich kid secrets, lessons taught in disappearance. Leah tightened her grip on the cart, recalling the pale blue book pressed against his chest. Inside, Mr. Grant's calm voice made the panic worse. He demanded logs, camera feeds, walkout times. Someone muttered about the train station. Leah's gaze shifted to the side door, the broken tape flapping. She took 2 steps toward it, stopped. She could be wrong, but the image persisted. Narrow light, flicker, click in the dark. Police questioned a girl in a cheer jacket. Reporters pressed against glass. The janitor's badge swiped, hands trembling. Leah's memory hit her. He had turned that key last night. She moved quietly down the hall past the trophy cases, her shoes whispering against the tile. She found the principal and spoke softly, "Check the basement." He blinked. Mr. Grant's eyes met hers, wide with question. She repeated it. "Yesterday. After last bell." He asked, "Are you certain?" She nodded. Keys jingled. They moved through the lobby, past vending machines humming. The side door yielded to the badge. The basement lock stared like a dark eye. The janitor's hand shook as he fit the key. Metal clicked. Cold air breathed up the stairs. Mr. Grant lifted his phone. "I hear him." The door swung open with a heavy crack, dust swirling. Inside, the basement was dim, cluttered. Toppled chairs, fallen shelves, the smell of damp concrete and rust. Leia's small voice called out. There, curled near the boiler, was Ethan. His mother's diary clutched to his chest. Skin pale, lips dry, hair dusted. The officer checked his pulse. "He's alive," he said, though unsteady. Mr. Grant brushed dirt from Ethan's face, voice trembling. "Stay with me, champ." Leia crouched, lifting the diary. Worn, soft, edges frayed. A page corner revealed a woman's handwriting, careful, deliberate. She held it tight. Ambulances arrived, lights painting the walls red and white. Students whispered outside. The janitor murmured, "I didn't know." Leia ignored the voices. At the hospital, Ethan was rushed to ICU. Dehydrated, low oxygen, strained lungs. "Another hour," the doctor said, and this would be about survival, not recovery. Mr. Grant asked who had told them. The principal indicated the waiting room. Leia sat holding the diary. "You saved my son," Mr. Grant said quietly. Leia shook her head. "He showed me kindness first." He crouched. "You remembered when no one else did. That's not small." She offered the diary back. He took it, turning it slowly. A photo inside, Ethan as a toddler, a smiling woman, another man, Mr. Grant's brother. Under the photo, "For Ethan and the child my brother never met." Ethan began to stir. Mr. Grant whispered thanks to Leia, leaving the ward. She watched the boy blink, weakly smile. The news erupted. Reporters swarmed. Kids who mocked her stared in awe. One diary, one small choice, reopened doors to a past long thought gone. Weeks later, Leia lived in a bright room with sunlight catching the old diary on her desk. Ethan recovered fully. Mr. Grant kept his word, not as charity but as family. "You're part of this family now," he told her. School unveiled a plaque, "Kindness saves lives." Leia stood aside, remembering the girl she once was, cold, hungry, unseen. Ethan joined her, hands in pockets. "Ever think about that night?" "Every day," she said. "Not bad, though?" "No," she whispered. "It changed everything." The story of the forgotten girl became the story of a family restored. Sometimes, a small voice can save the loudest lives. The days after Ethan's rescue felt unreal. Leia moved through the Grant household like a shadow, still adjusting to warmth, light, and the idea of safety. Every corner whispered reminders of what she had endured, the cold, the hunger, the streets, but here she had a room, a bed, and food. Not charity, Mr. Grant had insisted, but family. Ethan recovered quickly. The first time he saw her in the hospital room, his small hand found hers. "You came back," he said softly, almost a question. Leia smiled, a quiet thing, and squeezed back. The diary remained a mystery between them. Leia hadn't read it, she only knew its weight carried secrets too heavy for her to pry. At home, life settled into strange routines. Tutors arrived, lessons were planned, and slowly, Leia found herself enjoying things she hadn't known existed. Warm showers, freshly laundered clothes, even a desk that wasn't wobbly. But the house whispered family secrets in corners. Mr. Grant often lingered in the kitchen or library, staring at the old photographs of his brother, the woman he had loved, and their lives lost to time. One evening, Leia followed him quietly. He sat by the fireplace, diary in hand. "Your mother, she kept this," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "She wanted Ethan and his family to know the truth one day." Leia listened without interrupting. Her chest tightened. She didn't know if she wanted to uncover the past or leave it buried. The following morning brought unexpected visitors. A social worker, 2 officers, and a small camera crew. Mr. Grant had insisted she attend, but sit quietly. The social worker laid out the official papers. DNA had confirmed it. Leia was indeed Mara Ellis's daughter. Mr. Grant's niece. The revelation hit like a wave. She sat frozen, hands gripping the diary. Family. Real family. Not a fleeting warmth from strangers on the street, but blood, history, belonging. Ethan came up behind her, eyes wide. "You're really, my cousin?" Leia nodded. Words felt useless. Mr. Grant crouched beside her. "You're my family, Leia. Not because of what you did, but because of who you are." School became a strange new world. Students whispered, teachers smiled too brightly, and reporters occasionally snapped photos outside the gates. Leia avoided attention, keeping her head down. But she noticed small things. The way some students began to nod politely, the janitor giving a slight smile instead of the usual indifferent shrug. Even the air seemed different, lighter, quieter, respectful in a way she hadn't felt in years. Weeks later, a small assembly was held at Westbridge Prep. A plaque was unveiled near the basement door. Kindness saves lives. Applause echoed around her, some hesitant, some genuine. Leah stood at the edge, unnoticed by most. She felt the old girl inside, the one who had carried trash through sneering halls, who had counted coins before the station lights, who had feared being invisible. But she had changed. That girl had saved a life and in doing so, opened the door to her own. Ethan joined her afterward, a small smile tugging at his lips. Ever think about that night? Every day, she admitted. But it worked out, he said. You almost didn't say anything. I know, she whispered. And it changed everything. Evenings became quieter, filled with laughter she hadn't heard before. Mr. Grant stayed true to his word. Tutors, lessons, family dinners. Leah learned about her mother, Mara Alice, and the brother she never met. Stories of love, loss, and hope intertwined with the memories of her life on the streets. One rainy afternoon, Leah stood by the window watching the city glisten. Ethan was beside her, the pale blue diary open between them. You think Mom knew? He asked. She must have, Leah replied softly. She trusted me to find him. It was true. One small voice, a choice to speak, had shifted everything. Not only had Ethan been saved, but a hidden past was finally seen, and a lost girl had found her place in a family she never imagined. Outside, the rain washed the streets clean. Inside, Leah felt a quiet certainty for the first time. She belonged. She had survived, not alone, but now with those who loved her, who would never let her be invisible again. And that thought, small yet powerful, settled her heart like sunlight after a storm. Life in the Grant household settled into a rhythm that felt both strange and comforting. Leah awoke to sunlight filtering through blue curtains, the soft hum of the city below. She no longer counted coins or braced herself against the cold wind. Instead, she had breakfast with Ethan, Mr. Grant, and tutors who helped her catch up on years of schooling she had missed. Ethan was fully recovered, lively and talkative as ever. The first few days at home he barely left her side. You saved me, he would say again and again as if reminding himself and her of the truth. Leah would shrug, but a small smile tugged at her lips. She didn't think of herself as a hero, just a girl who had acted. The pale blue diary stayed with her, resting on her desk. Each day she dared to peek inside, discovering fragments of her mother's life. Photos, letters, small notes filled with love for the child she could never raise. There were pages written to Ethan as well, evidence of a family torn apart but not entirely lost. Leah traced her fingers over the words, feeling the weight of generations finally connecting. One afternoon, Mr. Grant approached her with quiet concern. Leah, I know you've been through more than anyone your age should. But I want you to know this, you don't have to carry it alone anymore. You're part of us now. Tears stung her eyes, but she nodded. Words weren't necessary. She felt it in the way the house felt safe, in the way Ethan laughed across the room, in the small warmth of Mr. Grant's hand resting on her shoulder. She belonged. School became a different world. Students and teachers treated her with respect, whispers replaced by nods and the occasional smile. The plaque near the basement remained a quiet reminder, kindness saves lives. But to Leah the lesson went deeper. One small voice, one decision to speak, had changed more than a day. It had altered the course of multiple lives, revealing truths that had long been hidden. Weeks turned into months. Leah explored the house, the garden, the corners of her new world. She learned about her mother, Mara Alice, and the uncle she never met. She learned the family history she had been robbed of, now made tangible through photographs, letters and Mr. Grant's stories. Each revelation was a thread weaving her into the tapestry of her family, finally giving her a sense of identity she had never known. One evening, Ethan found her staring out the window at the rainy streets. Do you ever think about that basement? He asked. All the time, she said softly. It feels like a lifetime ago, and like yesterday. He nodded. You saved me, and you saved yourself too. Leah looked at the pale blue diary in her hands, the pages worn but precious. Her mother had entrusted her with it, and in that trust, Leah had found her own courage. A small voice had spoken when the world was silent. That was all it had taken. As night fell over the city, the house was quiet, safe, and full of life. Leah knew she could finally rest. She had a home, a family, and a place in the world she had never imagined existed. The streets, the cold, the loneliness, all of it had led to this. Sometimes she thought back to the alley, to the train station, to the first day she saw Ethan slip through the basement door. She shivered at the memory but smiled. One choice, one brave moment had changed everything. And now, for the first time in her life, she could look forward without fear. Outside, thunder rolled softly, rain washing the city clean. Inside, Leia held the diary close, a symbol of her mother, of her courage, and of the family she had finally found. She closed her eyes, feeling at peace for the first time. She had survived. She had saved a life. And she had been saved in return. Sometimes the smallest voice truly does save the loudest lives.